Gyno was mainly produced by whatever the doctors told him, you know, like he didn't want to believe it, he didn't want to take the responsibility for his own actions when it came to gyno formation. Can you get gyno from eating too much plastic? Well, we're about to find out in this video. So Hamza, the man, the myth, the legend, made a video about getting a gyno surgery. It actually ended up getting a lot of views simply because there are a lot of people struggling with this kind of issue. And I feel like he misrepresented a lot of the facts when it comes to gynecomastia, especially amongst young men. I don't think anyone really blames him for getting things wrong because it's not like he has a degree in science or biology or nutrition or anything like that. Everything he knows is basically just research on the corners of the internet, but I don't think he's actually looked at any of the real research that's out there. So I'm going to be taking a look at the research today, and I'm also going to be giving you actual ways you can reduce your gyno if you happen to have it, if you happen to notice that you have puffy nipples, and if you feel like you might be in danger of getting gynecomastia. Join me on this journey of navigating through the landscape of misinformation by subscribing. Let's get into it. So before we get into the things that he got wrong, let's actually give credit where credit is due. Hamza got a lot of things right when it comes to, for an example, keeping your phone near your nutsack. It does seem to significantly reduce fertility. In terms of testosterone, the evidence is inconclusive. So this paper published in 2021 actually said that the cell phone signals coming from your phone, so usually nowadays they are like 4G, they used to be 2.4G, so 2.4 gigahertz. Now they're 4G and 5G, and obviously the frequency is higher. So the study said the reduction in testosterone in most animal studies demonstrated that Leydig cells are vulnerable to the RF EMR emitted by mobile phones. So this is the signal that is referred to as RF EMR. The reduction in Leydig cells through injury in cell structure and function, together with a reduction in testosterone, were found after mobile phone exposure of rodents. So this is still inconclusive because if we look at this paper further, we see that although mobile phones placed less than 15 centimeters, so that's about 7 inches, actually even less than that, that's like 6 inches, from the testes, have harmful SAR value on the testes. So this in turn reduces the function of the testicles. If you keep your phone in your pocket all the time, you will have a harder time conceiving children because your fertility is influenced directly by the cell phone signals that this phone radiates. If we look at this even further, then this specific paper actually found that in one of the studies that they looked at, while they saw a reduced LH and FSH production, which LH and FSH are luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone is the hormone that is responsible for producing testosterone, while luteinizing hormone is the hormone responsible for actually the production of sperm cells in your balls. So if you keep your phone near your balls all the time, these hormones levels will drop. But this does not specifically reduce your testosterone. So this study actually saw an increase in testosterone for people that held their phone near the balls. So you can see that this is still inconclusive. We have conflicting information coming in from left and right. But what we do know for a fact is that the phone signals, the radiation coming from your phone, does reduce fertility. So in that regard, Hamza was right. But the fact that he is saying that, or at least claiming in some of these videos that it reduces testosterone, not quite right. The downstream effects of reducing your fertility and therefore LH and FSH can lead to reduced testosterone, but this, as we'll learn later on in the video, does not actually give you gyno, nor does it increase estrogen specifically. Actually, it might even reduce your estrogen. There's also an added factor that the heat coming from your phone. Your balls are outside of your body for a reason. They need a lower temperature than your body temperature is, which is around, it's like 34 to 37 degrees Celsius. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but research has shown that your phone is actually, when it heats up, it can increase the internal temperature of your ball sack by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. So this actually has a significant effect on fertility because your sperm needs a very specific temperature range in order to be the most effective and to have the best quality. If you raise that temperature, you know, if you put a heater next to your balls, you're gonna see some negative results on your fertility panel. It makes sense that both the radiation and the heat coming from your phone is not a very good idea to keep your phone near your balls all the time. So the advice that Hamza gives is to hold your phone in your hand at all times, or at the very most, use your back pocket. I agree with this. I usually keep my phone away from me at all times. I don't keep it in my front pocket ever. Sometimes when I'm riding my motorcycle, I keep it in my jacket pocket, which is, I'd say, more than 6 to 7 inches away from my balls. It is something to keep in mind, and it is quite an easy fix to do in your lifestyle choices. You know, it's not gonna kill you to keep your phone slightly away from your balls, right? And the same goes for actually any body part that needs a high level of function in your body. So unfortunately, we have phones that require you to hold them up to your ear when you need to talk to someone. This has been shown to not be very good for your brain function and overall just endocrine system in general. So when you're talking to someone on the phone, prefer to use the loudspeaker, or at least keep the phone like a couple inches away from your ear. So you don't need to smash it into your head. You don't need to keep it next to your ear completely. Just keep it slightly away from your head. That's all there is to it. Next thing he actually got right was the effect of plastics, and more specifically phthalates, on your endocrine system. He claims that these actually increase estrogen, but as we will look at the research, we will find that it simply does not work that way. However, just like with the previous point, phthalates have been shown to actually reduce your fertility, and even worse than reducing your fertility, they have been shown to actually decrease your taint size, which is referred to as the anogenital distance, which is the asshole and your ballsack, basically. So you can imagine your butthole and your ballsack. The distance between them is actually in research been shown to be directly correlated with fertility and even gender. And we're talking about sex here, not just, you know, the mental gender that you want to assign to yourself, whatever that may be. If you've ever seen this video of Alex Jones, you know, slamming the papers on the table and saying, you know, they're turning the frogs gay.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Serious crap.
This video was funny as hell, I'll admit, but it does have some truth to it, because this stems from a research paper that found a correlation between the phthalates in the water that frogs live in and homosexuality. So there are a lot of theories on this, especially in the very right-wing part of endocrine research. They have this theory that basically the more phthalates and the more plastics you get in your diet, the more likely your offspring are to become either gay or get gender dysphoria, or in just general have smaller taints and micropenises. That last part is actually proven. The previous parts are just theoretical at the moment, but we will see more research on this subject as we go along, obviously. So the main plastic that is playing a huge role here is the di-2-ethyl-exyl phthalate, also referred to as DEHP. So the paper that we're looking at right now actually found an inverse association between prenatal material urinary DEHP metabolites, which is the plastics in your blood basically after you've consumed them or been exposed to them, and the penile measurements, as well as the taint size, referred to as AGD, so anogenital distance. So some papers actually even noticed a reduced penile size, which could explain the influx of micropenis owning individuals in the recent years. However, again, research on that subject specifically is inconclusive. But we do have very strong research suggesting that consumption of plastics, especially when your mom basically just eats a lot of processed foods and is exposed to these phthalates a lot of the time, could influence your taint size, therefore fertility, therefore your overall just ability to conceive. So like I mentioned, the effects on serum testosterone levels are still inconclusive. But if we look at the fact that these phthalates are known to reduce your fertility and also potentially change your biological sex, or at least your gender identity, I think we can all agree that they cannot be good for your testosterone levels in general. So Hamza got this one right as well. However, Hamza is blaming estrogen when it comes to his gynecomastia, and he's blaming these previously mentioned substances for producing his gyno. So before we figure out why he's wrong with this specifically, we need to understand how gyno is actually formed and what happens in your body when you get gynecomastia. So gyno is basically this massive fat behind your nipple, not your breast, but your nipple specifically, which is produced when there is an inadequate balance between estrogen and testosterone. So this paper here actually shows that there is a significantly higher level of risk when it comes to gynecomastia for people with a higher estradiol to testosterone ratio. So what this means is that if you do a blood test and you get your estradiol level and you divide it by your total testosterone level, you'll basically get the ratio between estradiol to testosterone. They saw that people with gynecomastia generally had a level between 22. This means that if you divide estradiol with testosterone, you get 22. And the people that didn't have gynecomastia, the control group per se, had a level of 18. So what this means is that there is a very good correlation between estradiol and testosterone ratio specifically when it comes to gynecomastia. So we know that estradiol does play a role in gynecomastia formation as well as testosterone. But what actually causes the rise of estrogen as well as a lowering of testosterone? Well, it's a process called aromatization. Aromatization is the process of converting testosterone into estrogen. Your body does this via an enzyme called aromatase. So people generally think that estrogen and estradiol is bad for men, but this is actually not the case. Estrogen is a very necessary compound for your brain health, your cognition, and your joint health. If your estradiol is too low compared to testosterone, you will notice that your joints get very, very stiff and they get sort of creaky even because they don't have that level of lubrication between them anymore. And as well as you will be in a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease and various other cognitive disabilities. But again, if estrogen gets too high compared to testosterone, you will be at an increased risk of feminine side effects such as gynecomastia. And like we mentioned, aromatase is the enzyme responsible for that process of converting testosterone into estradiol. So the process of aromatization is actually a very long and complicated chemical process, but in short, all you need to know is that aromatase acts as a catalyst between the process of converting testosterone to estradiol in the very last point of that process. So if you actually have a higher level of aromatase, more testosterone will be converted into estradiol. So logically speaking, if you wanted to reduce your risk of gynecomastia, you would need a lower level of aromatase. Well, as it turns out, aromatase is actually fat soluble, which means that the higher your body fat, the higher risk you have of developing gynecomastia. This is why you generally don't see guys that are very fit or been fit their whole life with gynecomastia. Generally, the people that get gyno are people like Hamza, who were fat as a kid and then got fit and then discovered, oh, I have gyno. Most likely what happened to Hamza was that he was a fat kid and then he hit puberty. During puberty, your testosterone level rises. And if your testosterone level rises and your aromatase is super high, well, guess what happens? Testosterone gets converted into estrogen immediately because aromatase is the enzyme responsible for that process. So, you know, a lot of people say that when you hit puberty, you might get gyno and it's a lot to do with genetics. Yes, it is true. Genetics play a slight role in that process. But at the same time, if you're someone who has a healthy level of body fat and you hit puberty, then the likelihood that you will develop gyno is super small. So aromatase has actually been shown to increase in individuals that have poor diet, lack of sleep, and just low activity levels in general as well. So all of these things that people usually think increase testosterone, they actually decrease aromatase, and in process the balance between testosterone and estradiol improves. So this is actually the reason why people say that, you know, when you get gyno, you're probably on steroids. This doesn't always have to be the case, because what steroids do is they increase the amount of testosterone in your bloodstream. And when your aromatase is high, the increased amount of testosterone actually gets converted into estrogen or estradiol pretty quickly. In this case, I don't think Hamza is on steroids, especially when he got gyno when he was 15. He likely wasn't on steroids, but what he did have was very poor habits and a high level of body fat, all of which kept his aromatase activity pretty high. And then when he hit puberty and started, you know, focusing more on increasing his testosterone went up, his estradiol stayed pretty much low, but due to the increased aromatase, all of that testosterone got converted into estrogen and he got titties. So what happened to Hamza was not the plastics and phytoestrogens in his diet and lifestyle, it was simply because he was being lazy, he had unhealthy living habits, he had high body fat, and he also smoked a lot of weed. Weed has actually been shown to significantly increase aromatase activity. So coming back to the example of bodybuilders injecting exogenous testosterone into their ass, we can actually see that the reason why they get high fluctuations of testosterone being converted into estrogen, etc., is because they do it very infrequently. They do it about twice a week, and they do it in high amounts. Usually when our body produces testosterone, it produces around 7 milligrams of testosterone daily. The average bodybuilder injects about 500 milligrams per week, so that's split into 2 doses, which is 250 on Monday and 250 on Thursday, for an example. So this causes huge spikes in testosterone and huge dips. And these dips usually happen when aromatase is triggered and it starts converting that testosterone into estrogen. So this can actually be limited by injecting more often and smaller dosages. Since Hamza was struggling with binge eating, apparently, there is a possibility that he actually was living very, very unhealthy, you know, binge eating, doing all of these testosterone lowering things for days and days on end, and then he decided suddenly to get healthy again, and then that cycle repeated and repeated. This could, in theory, cause his testosterone to jump up and down and jump up and down and up and down. And this could in turn cause hormonal imbalances more frequently in his body, which could mean that he basically simulated the effect of injecting exogenous testosterone, but in a much, much smaller scale. Was that because of that reason, or was it simply because he generally had just a high level of body fat, smoked a lot of weed, and had his aromatase high all the time? We don't really know, but what we do know is that for certain, he didn't get gyno because of phthalates and plastics and his phone being near his nutsack. He got gyno because he was smoking weed, he was severely obese, he had poor sleeping habits, poor lifestyle, drank a lot of alcohol, and in general, he was just being unhealthy. So ironically enough, the fact that he didn't get gyno earlier was simply because his testosterone wasn't that high. Men don't actually produce estrogen from, you know, our ball sacks the same way that female ovaries produce estrogen. We actually get the estrogen only from the process of aromatization. His aromatase was high, but his testosterone was low, so there was not actually any testosterone being able to get converted into estrogen. So ironically, the fact that he had low testosterone before puberty actually might have saved him from that gyno. But you know, then puberty hit and his testosterone rose up suddenly, and there he got his gyno, right? So now we know what actually causes gyno. How do we get rid of it? If you don't want to end up like Hamza, if you're around, you know, the ages of 12 to 18, whenever your puberty starts getting triggered, or if you're already going through puberty and you notice that your milkers are getting a little puffy and you might see the early effects of gynecomastia setting in, here are a couple things that you can try. First of all, clean up your diet. You will need a much lower body fat percentage in order to hold less aromatase in your system, therefore reduce the rate of aromatization of your testosterone into estrogen, right? Second, you need an adequate amount of sleep. This goes without saying, you know, 7 hours a night would be ideal. And we don't count the amount of time that you actually take to get to the sleeping point. So if you go to bed at, like, let's say you set a timer for 8 hours and you go to bed and you take half an hour to fall asleep, then you've slept for 7.5 hours effectively. So try to get at least 7 hours of pure sleep per night. So there are a couple of foods that you can actually eat that reduce the activity of aromatase, namely cruciferous vegetables, so like broccoli, cauliflower, etc. Celery, olive oil, oysters, parsley. So these are all shown to actually reduce aromatase in your body. Obviously, if you're still fat and eating all of these foods, then you're gonna have to lose that weight first. So if you're someone who hasn't hit puberty just yet, work on losing that body fat, because once puberty hits, once your testosterone jumps up, then you're gonna run into some issues, right? And please, for the love of God, stop smoking weed chronically. Although weed has not been shown to increase aromatase in every single individual, there does seem to be some sort of genetic susceptibility. So in general, smoking weed every now and then is fine if you can, you know, keep it to a normal range. But doing it every single day in high dosages is simply not good for you. Like, even microdosing every single day, it's just generally, if you're looking to improve your health, it is not a good compound to put into your body, let's just say that. Now, the last thing to do is actually get a blood test and calculate what your estradiol to testosterone ratio is. If it's higher than 18, then there is a good chance that you have a very high amount of aromatase in your body that is converting that testosterone into estradiol. The actual pharmacology that can help with you on this subject is an aromatase inhibitor. So in general, you might be able to get a prescription from your doctor. If not, then you will need to do a lot of research before you actually decide to go on those, because tanking your estrogen to a suboptimal range is not a good idea generally. Like I already mentioned, estrogen and estradiol are very important in your joint health and in your cognition. So when you actually reduce your estrogen to a very low level, you will notice a bunch of other side effects such as erectile dysfunction, joint pain, just in general grogginess and unhappiness. So estrogen actually plays a huge role in being a man, essentially. As ironic as that sounds, I know it's the female sex hormone, but it is very, very necessary for male reproductive health and health in general. There are a couple aromatase inhibitors, namely Arimidex, so that's ARIMIDEX. Then there's Aromasin, which is AROMASIN. These two are very similar in their effects, although I would recommend Aromasin a bit more because it has a bit more research behind it and it is seemingly more tissue selective. So these two are your options. Again, I would suggest you talk to your doctor first and ask them about these very compounds. Now, if you've actually developed gyno already, you might want to look into a compound class called SERMs, which stands for selective estrogen receptor modulators. So in short, what they do is that the cells, the fat cells behind your nipple, which are, you know, the cells that cause you gyno, they actually have these estrogen receptors on their cell walls. And when you have high level of estrogen in your body, aromatase inhibitors they reduce the process of aromatization into estrogen. But if you already have a high level of estrogen in your body, then what you can do is take a SERM such as clomiphene or tamoxifen, also known as Nolvadex. And what they do is basically block the process of estrogen binding onto the receptors in the cells of your nipples, basically. These are usually used for females that are looking to reduce the risk of breast cancer or reverse the process of breast cancer. They have been shown to actually have a significant effect on reducing gyno formation and reducing the gyno itself. So if you're someone who's already feeling like you have gyno, and if you get in shape and your gyno is still there, look into these two compounds. You might be able to actually reverse the effects of gyno formation and get them to be smaller. If you don't have the money for surgery, then these are very good options for you. Just again, talk to your doctor about it first. You don't want to put compounds into your body that you know nothing about, but these are your options, for an example. So in conclusion, if you're someone who struggles with gyno or thinks you might get gyno, first of all, get into a lower body fat percentage, clean up your diet, clean up your lifestyle, avoid sugary foods or foods that make you fat in general, get adequate sleep, look into aromatase inhibitors, and if necessary, look into SERMs. Gyno is a very hard thing to deal with. I personally, luckily, haven't had gyno, even though I've had sensitive nipples in the past, but I actually haven't had them develop into full range gyno, luckily. So I can see why Hamza is very passionate about this, because this is a very hard thing that he had to deal with. Again, phthalates and your phone and all of these external sources are not the responsible factors for his gyno. His gyno was mainly produced by whatever the doctors told him, you know, like he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to take the responsibility for his own actions when it came to gyno formation. Unfortunately for him, it was his own poor life choices that caused gyno for him. So I hope this video helped you better understand how the endocrine system works and what you can actually do to reduce the gyno that you get. Like I already mentioned, if you start seeing early symptoms of gynecomastia, fear not, it is reversible. According to current research, you might not even have to get surgery to get rid of it. And if you're interested in reversing gyno further, let me know in the comments. I will try to make a video on that process as well. And make sure you check out this video, because if you follow the steps there, you're already halfway there to getting rid of your gynecomastia and in general getting rid of your titty fat. And yeah, if you found this video helpful, then share it with someone who might find it useful as well. And as always, fly high.